What's up, Pirates? Wraith and Jim here with Awaken TCG, and today we have OP07 Metabreakers. We're going to be going over a bunch of the cards that are coming out with this new set and what we think is going to break the meta.
Yep, so for OP07, once again, since OP04, when we actually started making these Meta Breaker videos every set, Red, once again, doesn't have any meta-defining cards. Red has been getting screwed for now 4 sets in a row, and spoilers, OP08, it might be looking the same, but maybe a little bit of hope. Let's go ahead and look at these OP07 cards, starting with green. And first up here on the left, we have the new Jewelry Bonnie that is going to go along with our new Jewelry Bonnie leader. This is a 5/6 with a 1,000 counter and the Supernova Bonnie Pirates type. So playable in a lot of decks, including Red-Green Law, but obviously mostly in Bonnie. And this card is going to say, on play, up to one of your opponent's rested characters or Dawn cards will not become active in your opponent's next refresh phase. So if you have not seen this card before, this card is going to make a huge impact in pretty much every green deck because it is not leader locked. So this is going to basically Doflamingo effect, lock down anything you want except for a leader. So if they just swung with something really big, now you can basically say, okay, I'm going to pseudo KO you for the turn, which can be super impactful and make a lot of a difference in the game, especially if that target has, say, maybe like a win attacking effect or something that your opponent really wants to get off. This card is basically just really cheap removal for one turn. And then also, not to mention, if you can see there, it rests one of your opponent's Dawn cards, or sorry, one of your opponent's rested Dawn cards does not become active. This is the first, I think, that we've ever seen that ability. And basically, you know, that sound maybe doesn't sound that strong from just saying it out loud, but when you think about it, it basically is negging your opponent one Dawn for their next turn because one of their Dawn they cannot set as active. So against any deck that's trying to play these big cards on curve, say like Katakuri wants to play Big Mom, we can now play Bonnie. We know they're going to be on 10 next turn, set one of their Dawn to not become active. So now they're stuck at 9 the next turn, and they cannot play the card they want to play. So even if Bonnie does not have a rested target on board, you can always rest the Dawn and just basically -1 Dawn to your opponent. Kind of similar to a 5/6 Magellan in purple, with a little bit differently because the next turn they'll be back to normal. But this card is just so flexible and so strong, playable off stuff like 8-drop Rosinante, and really good with Bonnie's leader effect since you can kind of synergize it by resting what you want and then locking it with Bonnie on the next turn. But yeah, really strong card, going to make a huge impact for sure.
Yeah, I mean, green's going to be super nasty. And then on the other hand, we have one more green card. It's going to be 6 cost, 7,000 power, Basil Hawkins. So he reads, if your leader is a supernova type, this character gains blocker. And then once per turn, if this character would be removed from the field by your opponent's effect, you may rest one of your opponent's characters instead. So basically, you can't KO this unless you have 2 pops, or if you have a card like 3-drop Brook, where if it swings and then it costs -1, and if it's 0 or less, it KOs a target. So if that is what you're swinging with to kill this Basile, that is a workaround. But for the most part, this is always going to be up on the board. Very good card against Lucci. Has a hard time KOing it because most of his KOs are with 5-drop Kaku, Lucci, things that are on play KO, where this card is just going to be able to rest that target that character that just got played, and it's not going to be able to KO this card. So super good. Again, it's only once per turn, so a double KO will always do the trick. But it's a great stat line. It's a blocker on top of everything else, and a very good green card. And so green got some really good cards this set, and so I'm looking forward to dabbling in a little bit of green for this next set. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, really strong card. And I think the second time we've ever seen an effect that can prevent even bottom decks. So really, really strong. Next up here for blue. Blue also has 2 very strong cards that are going to make a difference in this meta. It's going to be 4 cost Jinbei on the left here. It's going to be a 4/5 with a 1,000 counter. The Fishman, 7 Warlords of the Sea, and Sun Pirates type. It's going to read, on play, you can play 1 7 Warlords of the Sea type character card with a cost of 4 or less other than Jinbei from your hand. So if you're a blue Doflamingo player, you just read this card and you were like, holy shit. This is like the best card that deck could ever ask for. You can literally, on your 3 Dawn turn, swing 7, play Jinbei from the top of deck, and then play out like a Weevil from hand, draw 1. So you get on 3 Dawn a 5k and a 6k, and you draw 1. Like, what is that? They're definitely trying to make that deck good. But Jinbei is not only good in Doflamingo, this is still really good in probably, I'd say, the better blue deck next set, which will be the new Boa leader. Just because it's going to be basically your main bodies you play in that deck. You'll play Jinbei along with a few 4-cost 2Ks that that also have Warlord, like the new Law. There's a new Crocodile 2K as well. Obviously, they aren't as impactful as Jinbei is, but pretty much just a fantastic swarm option in any blue deck that's running the 7 Rulers of the Sea package. And honestly, really looking forward to playing it. Might get me into blue Doflamingo, not going to lie.
Yeah, for sure. Very tempo heavy. It's going to be an insane card, and we're probably going to see a lot of it. I feel like I've seen a lot of people leaning towards wanting to play blue, especially on social media, so it's going to be interesting. And then on the other hand, we have Boa Hancock, a 6-cost, 8,000 power. Effect reads, on play, up to one of your opponent's characters other than Monkey D. Luffy cannot attack until the end of your opponent's next turn. Then place up to one of your characters cost 1 or less at the bottom of the owner's deck. So it freezes your opponent's character. They do restand, they just cannot attack for the next turn. And then you get a bottom, a 1-drop, which it could be a searcher, just any little body gets bottom decked. And then interestingly, it says it can freeze any character other than a Monkey D. Luffy. So that probably has to do a little bit with the lore that I'm not familiar with.
Yeah, basically her ability, I think we've seen something like this before in the game already, but yeah, her ability doesn't affect Luffy because he is not attracted to her whatsoever. He's attracted to being the Pirate King.
There we go. But yeah, 2 very good cards, and we have a buddy that's going to be playing Boa, so I'm gonna definitely have a good amount of testing on that deck, and it's gonna be fun.
For sure. Next up here for purple, we actually only have one new card that is really worth talking about. Unfortunately, purple, if you don't know, got the Foxy leader, and the mass majority of that color is going to be all Foxy Pirate support. Looked okay at the start, but after the meta panned out, yeah, Foxy's not good, guys. So unfortunately, his support will not be in this Meta Breaker video. But we do have this card that was not made for Foxy. It was pretty much just made as a generally strong purple card. It's going to be Sanji, is a 6-cost, 6,000 power with 2k counter. So this is a 2k counter with the Straw Hat type. So searchable, very, very nice to see. If the number of Dawn cards on your field is at least 2 less than the number of your opponent's Dawn, give this card in your hand -3 cost. And then it's also a blocker. So this is a 6k blocker that if you are playing a purple deck that goes minus in Dawn, is now a 3-cost 6k blocker. That's also a 2k when it's in your hand. This card is ridiculous. In a lot of mono purple decks, you're kind of just running this card, right? In decks like RP Luffy, this is the perfect target to play if you didn't win after you played a 10-drop. But I think the main deck to talk about this card in, and is also why it's here, is going to be RP Law. RP Law just got another insane 2k that is basically printed for the leader. We can now play out 6k blockers off of our leader effect, which Law wasn't able to do. You played Kid and Queen, right? You can't play those off leader effect. This one you can. It's also a 2k. You know, getting two or less Dawn than your opponent is not hard in that deck. You literally just have to use leader effect once, and now we're there. So, yeah, busted card, especially in Law. You'll be seeing a lot of this guy next set for sure.
Yeah, and on top of that, it's like they had to make it a 6-cost. So for decks that KO, it's like, oh, you have to do that extra mile just to get there. It's nasty.
That is true. As a Lucci player, that does make a big difference a lot of the time.
Next up, we have Tempest Kick for our black decks. Obviously, we have Great Eruption getting banned June 22nd, here in about a week. Very unfortunate, but it has to happen. The card is broken. And so we have a replacement for OP07. It is a CP9 card. It reads main, draw 1 card. Then, if you have 10 or more cards in your trash, give up to one of your opponent's characters -3 cost during this turn. And it is a 1 cost. It has a trigger that is KO up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost 3 or less. So the only downside of this card is you can't really use it early on until you have 10 or more in trash. So that's like turn 2, turn 3. Then by turn 4, you should definitely have 10 in trash, able to use that. And it is a -3, right? So for late game, it is technically a better grade eruption, just not as good early game. But yeah, I think this card is very good, especially in Lucci, and it's definitely a card that's needed. I like how they didn't amplify the power on this until towards the late game, where it's like, okay, now this card matters a lot more versus giving it a lot of power early on, especially going up against decks like RP Law, where they're just dropping 4 drops all day. This card is not really usable to get an early KO with, let's say, maybe a Brook you could drop, and things of that nature. But overall, this card is very good in Lucci and definitely a staple.
Yeah, really, really strong card for sure. Next up on the right here, we have our secret rare Sabo. I think most people, when the OP07 dropped in the East, didn't really believe in this card, but nowadays people have realized this card is just generically really, really strong. A multi-wide KO is always good. Let's go over the effect. It's an 8/9 with the Revo Army type, and it's going to read, on play, you can trash 1 card from your hand, KO one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 5 or less, and one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 3 or less. So very similar to 4/6 Lucci, we are KOing 2 cards. It has the cost of a lot of other black KO cards, like Sakuzuki, where you have to trash a card to get the effect off. But this effect is just so strong. Like, you pair it with 1 Ice Age, and now we're KOing an 8 and a 5, right? Like, ridiculous. And, God forbid your leader have extra cost reduction, or you are Lucci running stage with extra cost reduction on top of that. This card is basically taking out 2 large bodies with ease for just the cost of trashing 1 card and developing a 9k body. So busted card, pretty much playable in every good black deck, and probably every good black deck from here on out.
Ooh, all right. Next up, we have our yellow characters. These meta breakers for yellow are pretty insane, honestly. First one we're going to talk about is the new Monkey D. Luffy. It is a 5 cost, 6,000 power with 1k counter. It's going to read activate main. You may trash this character if you have 2 or less life cards, KO up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost 4 or less, then draw 1 card, and then the trigger effect, KO up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost 4 or less. So what this means is you have a card that you can play for 5 Dawn, pop a 4, and it cycles itself. You draw 1, which is really good. It's basically a better reject in a sense because you're drawing 1. And then in decks like Black Yellow Luffy, not only do you get to draw 1, you pop a unit, you got to put this card back in trash, which later on you can use with your Luffy effect, and potentially do this over again. So it's just like, in a deck like Black Yellow Luffy, this card is insane, right? You minimize your opponent's pressure, you're drawing cards, and your opponent is just stuck with still trying to starve you. But cards like this make it hard for them to try to do that and build board at the same time, because you can just actively reduce their board while you're not really reducing your hand size, and you can just stall for the late game, because once you're at 10 Dawn, you do that Luffy ability, Moria, and it just gets really crazy. So in decks like that, this card is S tier, super insane. And then I think you run it in NL as well, just for the trigger, and it's a good card to cycle while clearing your opponent's board. But yeah, this Luffy here makes those 2 decks really insane.
For sure. And last up here, we have our second secret rare. Our second brother is going to be Portgas D Ace, a 10 cost, 10,000 power, no counter, and the Whitebeard Pirates type. This is going to read, on play, you can add 1 card from the top of your deck to the top of your life cards. Then, if you have 2 or less life cards, this character gains a rush for the turn. So, a 10/10 rusher, which doesn't sound very good, but it is an unconditional heal, which I think is unheard of. There's always some condition, whether it's leader locked or it's like a Dom minus. I think this is the only big guy that's like, okay, I'm just going to heal you, no questions asked. And then on top of that, if you're low on life, now you're getting rush. So the main deck this is used in, that is worth talking about, is Enel. Enel already had Yamato and Katakuri, which were consistent heals. Yamato is kind of weird because if your opponent's low, doesn't really get a good KO off. It's only a 9k body. Katakuri is a little weird because you need a target on board to put in your own life. Ace makes this a lot easier. We're developing a 10k body, guaranteeing our heal. There's no BS there. And then we are just going to be swinging 10. So made Enel a whole lot stronger, along with a few new good triggers, including this Monkey D. Luffy. Gonna make the deck an absolute menace for sure, and really excited to see.
All right, Pirates, thank you guys so much for getting to the end of this video with us. We just went over all the OP07 meta breakers. Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. But with that being said, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, also subscribe to my Patreon. The content has been ramping up on that as well. But I will see you guys on the next one. Peace.